my reasoning for cooking had nothing to do with becoming famous or wealthy. It was more about the nurturing of people.
Hey everyone, on this week's episode, I'm joined in the studio by the chef and restaurateur Thomas Keller, one of the world's most revered chefs, widely celebrated for his 3 Michelin-starred restaurants, the French Laundry in Yountville, California, and Per Se in New York City. Thomas approaches his work with a highly refined, expertly tuned set of standards that feed the entire philosophy and culture of his restaurant group. As he makes clear on this episode, though, this recipe for success did not come immediately. It was the result of 2 decades of failing and learning from mistakes before at last, in 1994, he opened the French Laundry, which was immediately praised by critics, including the New York Times' Ruth Reichl, who hailed it as the most exciting place to eat in the United States. In many respects, Thomas was at the forefront of a more local-focused approach to cooking. He was also a pioneer in making fine dining more relaxed and approachable, and decidedly less fussy. The food world today would not be the same were it not for Thomas's wide-spanning influence. In addition to the French Laundry and Per Se, Thomas also runs Ad Hoc, Bouchon Bakery, Bouchon Bistro, and Row Restaurant and Lounge, all also in Yountville, as well as a surf club restaurant in Miami, a Bouchon Bistro and a Bouchon Bakery in Las Vegas, and a Bouchon Bistro in Coral Gables, Florida. He is also the author of several cookbooks, including the French Laundry Cookbook, which has sold more than 1 million copies. But if it sounds like Keller has built a massive global presence like some of his celebrity chef contemporaries, he hasn't. With great intention, he has kept his operation firmly focused on the local and largely in Napa Valley. From the start, he has forged what he calls a symbiotic relationship with farmers, fishermen, foragers, wineries, and other purveyors who sustain his restaurants, and he continues to do so today. On the episode, we talk about food media, particularly the Netflix show Chef's Table, which features Thomas in its latest season, themed legends in honor of the show's 10th anniversary. We also discuss his cameo on season 3 of The Bear, the essential role of slowness in his life and work, and why he views persistence as the greatest form of pleasure. Before we get into the episode, I'd first like to thank our Season 11 presenting sponsor, the high jewelry Maison Van Cleef & Arpels, which this year is collaborating with the American Museum of Natural History in New York to present the exhibition Cosmic Splendor, jewelry from the collections of Van Cleef & Arpels, an awe-inspiring assemblage of jewelry creations, timepieces, and precious objects with astronomical references from the Maison's patrimonial collection, as well as from private loans. From dramatic necklaces depicting rockets in flight, to gem-encrusted pendants inspired by distant nebulae, to watches with intricate mechanisms that trace the transit of planetary bodies. Cosmic Splendor features nearly 70 astrological, celestial, and mythological creations that celebrate the wonders and mysteries of the cosmos. Among the enchanting universe of pieces on display are a diamond-studded yellow, gold, and platinum meteor clip from 1951, a yellow, gold, and ruby moon pendant from 1969 that's a celebration of the Apollo 11 moon landing, and a gold, sapphire, and diamond Diana clip depicting the goddess of the moon from 2011. These works trace the stylistic evolution and the level of expertise that this high jewelry maison, founded in Paris's Place Vendôme in 1906, has developed throughout its history. You can purchase admission tickets or learn more about Cosmic Splendor at amnh.org/exhibitions. That's amnh.org/exhibitions. And now, here's my conversation with Thomas. Hi, Thomas. Welcome to Time Sensitive.
Thank you for welcoming. Thank you for allowing me to come. I'm excited to be here.
I thought we'd kick this off with Chef's Table. It's
Sure.
timely and relevant and features you in its 10th season this year. In the episode, I immediately noticed this Vacherin Constantin clock in your kitchen.
Okay.
At the French Laundry with the phrase sense of urgency underneath it. So I thought we'd start there. What do you hope to instill in the kitchen with this sense of urgency phrase on the wall?
Well, the Vacherin clocks are very special. I think we're the only people that have Vacherin clocks, wall clocks in the world. And I was very lucky to receive one for, 5 for per se and 5 for the French Laundry. So those are kind of where they hang. And sense of urgency, the sense of urgency sign is underneath all of our clocks in our entire restaurant group. So if you walk into a kitchen or to the restaurant, into the offices, underneath the clock is, whatever the clock may be, the word sense of urgency is there. And sense of urgency is a philosophical attitude that we have on how we work or how we progress, how we are preparing ourselves for the future. And this is very important for young people to understand, because your ability to progress in your life and in your career is based on you being prepared for the next stage of your career or your life. And for me, when I was a young cook, I worked with a sense of urgency. In other words, I wanted to work quickly, get my work done, to the standard that the chef expected, with some time left over so I could learn what somebody else was doing. In a case of, me being the poissonnier and finishing my work and having 10, 15, 20 minutes left over, I can go to work with the saucier for that amount of time and learn what he was doing. So when the chef needed a new saucier, I could raise my hand and say, hey, I'm ready. I've been over there for the past 3 or 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, preparing myself to take over the job. That's what sense of urgency means. It's like preparing yourself for your future. Because if you're not preparing yourself for your future won't happen. Now, what does sense of urgency feel like? This is interesting because sense of urgency feels like the time when you're on the freeway and you have to use the restroom and the next rest stop is 50 miles away. That's what sense of urgency feels like.
I imagine some of this also connects a bit to carpe diem, this idea of you only have so many hours in a day, seize them while they're here.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What does it mean to you to finally be featured in Chef's Table? Connected to that, what impact do you think Chef's Table has had over the past 10 years on food and restaurant culture?
It's a good question. Finally, I wasn't really waiting for anything. So it was not like finally for me. It wasn't like my turn. It wasn't something I anticipated or something that I sought or anything. That means Chef Table came 10 years ago, and I think I saw a couple episodes. I don't really enjoy watching food shows, so I didn't spend a lot of time with Chef's Table. I know that they've done extraordinarily well. They've won many Emmys. Many of my friends and colleagues have been on the show. In fact, I didn't watch Grant's episode until just before we did my episode, just so I can kind of see what it was like for him.
And his quotes, by the way, about your work are just
very nice, very generous. Yeah. So, it wasn't really something in my radar. I don't necessarily migrate towards television or, interviews for that matter, although I'm expected to do them. I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm always apprehensive, and it's always awkward for me to see myself, hear myself, or even read about myself in anything. It just doesn't feel quite right for me. So it's not something that I'm trying to do a lot. And obviously, because I've never been on a lot of television shows. I mean, Bobby Flay or Tom Colicchio, right, or Emeril, right, they migrate to that and they've done it really, really well. And have influenced so many young cooks, not just in the profession, but outside the profession as well. So I think all of it is great stuff. What they've done, I think what Chef Table's done, or any of the food shows have done, have really influenced generations of people, whether they're consumers, whether they're hobbyists, or whether they're professional chefs. And it's all good for the profession and good for America. And, in this case, you see these things migrating around the world. That Japanese show that migrated to here and became an instant hit. But all of this didn't exist when I started cooking, right? So my history wasn't about that. My reasoning for cooking had nothing to do with becoming famous or wealthy. It was more about the nurturing of people. It was the reason I became a cook. And if you went home to tell your parents that you were going to be a cook in 1975 or 76, they would label you a loser. Like, what are you kidding? You can't do anything better than being a cook? Because cooks back then were like, you consider it was like a short order cook. I mean, yes, there were some great restaurants in New York City, obviously, all the La restaurants. I think Le Pavillon, the first one opened in 1941. You had the World Fair here in 1936, I think, which really kicked off that whole the French chef migration to New York. And so you look back on that and you understand where we all came from in certain ways. But it wasn't something there was droves of young Americans trying to be chefs during that period of time in our history.
I have to bring up the bear here. You were on season 3, episode 10. What was that experience like?
It was great. I mean, I Christopher Storer, who we hired Christopher in 2014 to direct a documentary on our restaurants. 24 hours in the life of our restaurants. So he went to all of our restaurants and filmed, and then of course edited to a point where you had 17 minutes featuring all the restaurants throughout the entire day, from the morning until the closure of most of the restaurants. Hans Zimmer actually did our music for that, which was great. So I've known Chris since then. When the beer came out, I was really like, wow, this is great. Super happy for him, right? He has a show, he's directing, he's producing it. I mean, he's writing it, he created it. I love that when people that and even if you don't know, become successful in the profession that they're working in. I never expected to be on the show. It wasn't something, once again, I'm trying to be on the bear. I didn't call Christopher up and say, when are you going to put me on? And he asked, I think towards the end, or when he was developing the 3rd season, he called me and said there was a piece about roasting chickens. And Jeremy was going to roast a chicken for his mother. And that was kind of the premise behind it. And there was no better person than me to do the roasted chicken because, the roasted chicken from our restaurants, and Bouchon and the roasted chickens I've done on YouTube have been very popular. So I said, of course, why wouldn't I do that? The day came, and there wasn't really a lot of preparation for it. He sent me what Jeremy was going to say and what was going to do and kind of the, the scene, if you will. But there was not a script for me. He just said, you be the person you are. Just say what you would normally say to a young person who's in your kitchen and just starting. And so that was the conversation. And we did it in like 45 minutes. So it was one take and we were done and I was back to work in the kitchen. So it was all over. I am very grateful and blessed to have had the opportunities to do things I never thought I would ever do, and to be part of things that I never thought I'd be part of. So yes, I'm not going to necessarily turn them down, but it's not something I search for.
Right.
But the bear was fun. I got a hat, which was really nice. And I got to see Christopher again and work with him again. And it was fun. It was a nice kind of reunion, if you will.
Turning here to the subject of time, you've written, I've realized that of all the tools of refinement, time is the greatest. Having the time to refine and refine and refine, I've managed to create more time by opening the kitchen up and adding more chefs. When you're rushing to be ready for service, the final refinements sometimes get lost. Time is the ultimate tool. Could you talk to me a bit about your philosophies on time? How do you think about it in your life and work?
It's fascinating. I mean, we're all thinking about time, throughout our lives, and certainly we focus on it more and more as we get older, right? How much time that we're spending on things and what's the important things that we really want to spend time on. For me, as a young cook, I was really impatient, as most young cooks are. We always want to do the next thing before we're ready to do the next thing. So I'm always advising young chefs, to be patient. Be patient with your career. This is a moment in time that you're doing this specific role. One of my best times as a young cook was working on the line with, 3 or 4 other cooks or 5 other chef de parties. That's kind of when you are on the playing field, right? I've always associated my profession with sports franchises. It's really important to realize that that's when you're playing the game, when you're actually cooking food. You become a sous chef, it's different, right? You become a CDC, a chef de cuisine, it's different. You become an executive chef, it's different. So enjoy those moments when you're actually doing the job that you always wanted to do. The reason you became a cook was to cook. And so be patient with your career. Enjoy the moment while it's there. Spend the time doing it around the stove, because once you're done, it's hard to go back. That's a really important aspect about what I'm trying to get my younger team members to understand. Time. And it's not just in the kitchen, it's also in the dining room. I mean, every young person in any profession wants to move up as quick as they can. Sometimes it takes time, and appreciate those moments. Time for refinement is just that. It's time to be able to reflect and think about things. And it becomes more and more difficult when we have more and more distractions in our lives. I mean, I hate to say it, but this is kind of a distraction, right? So I could be in the kitchen, right?
Sorry, Thomas.
No, it's okay. No, but this is what happens. And this is now, part of our profession and part of our responsibility as chefs. I mean, this didn't happen, last generation. I mean, this was not something that chefs did before, right? Of my generation began this in America. You look at the last generation in France, yes, there was that kind of interaction between media or marketing or those kinds of things. But in America, I'm part of the first generation of American chefs. This was all new. So I appreciate the position I'm in and trying to be responsible to sharing, having conversations in and around my career, my profession, and what I've learned throughout this 47 years of being part of the hospitality profession, the restaurant profession. It's a wonderful thing when we would sit down at the French Laundry, in the first 12 years when I was actually, part of that team, sit down at the end of the night and talk about what we were going to do tomorrow, because the menu changes every day. Those moments were the moments that we would set up the idea of what was going to happen tomorrow. And then we would come in and start to execute it and refine it as we went. And that was really a fascinating process. I'm not sure any other restaurant does that. We could plate the rouget, going out on the first table and refine it for the next table. That's how dynamic we were, how flexible we were, because we were always thinking about what is it we can do to make it better, to improve on what we've just done. And that could be right from one table to the next. That's how quick we could be. That's really a luxury, because in most restaurants, the young chef de parties aren't really part of that. They don't have any influence over what the dish looks like or the composition of the dish. At French Laundry, and per se, we always had that interaction between chef de parties, sous chefs, chef de cuisine, and or myself. And that sense of refinement was quick sometimes, and other times we would think about it over a period of the entire year and think about the asparagus coming in the springtime. And we would get excited when the asparagus came back because we would revisit what we did the year before and refine it. The sense of refinement is not just about a moment. It's about a specific technique or specific ingredient, a specific plate, with all these different moments of refinement.
Yeah, I mean, this approach really makes me think of this piece I read preparing for this from the Wall Street Journal a few years ago. You noted that you have an allergy to brainstorming. And you're quoted as saying, if you try to set time aside for that, you're actually trying to force something that may not be ready to appear or reveal itself. For you, it really seems like it's like this, you're doing it in the act. It's actually, but I should also note here that, and the piece notes this too, that you have daily 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. meditation sessions.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you that you can't force true creativity. It is really about being open and letting it come when it calls you, being in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And creativity is an interesting word because you have to really question the idea, do we really create anything? I mean, everything's here, right? I mean, there's nothing new on earth. Creation is a difficult word for me to embrace, yet I understand how it's used. And I think that there's moments in my life where I've been strongly influenced and quote unquote created something that had not been done before in that way. The cornet is the perfect example, right? I mean, yes, it's an ice cream cone. That's what I saw. I saw an ice cream cone at Baskin Robbins, and so that influenced me to do the cornet. Was it creation? No, I don't think it was a true creation, but it was certainly something that had never been done before. And that in and of itself, gives this idea of something that Thomas Keller created this coronet. And that's fine. I'll take the credit. But when someone says to you, what are you going to create tomorrow? It's like, really? I mean, who knows? What does that mean? How does creation work? Well, it's really about being aware of the world around you, having this sense of awareness, so that when there's something happens in your life that influences you or inspires you, that's another word, inspiration. It's interesting because, yes, I mean, I was sad, I was depressed, I was leaving the city here, New York City, that I love so much, and I had to do something in LA that was going to wow the Angelinos. I had no idea what I was going to do, but the young girl put the ice cream cone up there, and I immediately saw that. So I was aware. I was aware from what was the pressure on me at the moment, what I was going through, what I had to do, and I saw something different that day. And you do the same thing. We all do the same thing. I mean, we could be walking down the street, and a leaf blow across the street, and that can influence you to do something different, right? I mean, poets do it, artists do it. Everybody is kind of influenced by things that they see. And interpretation is the second thing, right? Your awareness, influence, inspiration, interpretation. Interpreting is something that's meaningful for you. Whatever it is, whatever you're doing, that's an important thing. And then the last word there is evolution. How does that continue to evolve over time? You do it based on what you first saw, but how do you continue to improve it day after day? Sometimes improvement's a hard thing to do, right? I mean, the coronet has been improved over time, but it's still the coronet. The oyster and pearl, which, was another very famous dish that we do at French Onion per se, we've tried to do, the oyster and pearl 2.0. And it failed every single time. So it's kind of just stays the same preparation we did 32 years ago. It's the same. The dish may be different, a little more refined.
Well, that's the nuance. Some things are meant to stay the same. Some things can, But then the problem is that then people kind of criticize you. Like, what? He's been doing that thing for 32 years. What, can't you think of anything else? Well, it's like the Rolling Stones. I mean, Mick Jagger gets up there and sings Satisfaction every time he goes to the concert because why does he sing Satisfaction? Not necessarily because he wants to, but everybody that's there in the audience is expecting him to sing Satisfaction. It's the coronet.
Exactly.
It's the ice cream cone.
If he doesn't do it, they're like, shit, what happened?
Well, in Chef's Table, you say, if you're not having fun, then what's the point? And it's interesting because it reminds me of, this is just a funny 90s growing up in America childhood memory I have, but my dad had a bumper sticker on one of his cars that was a Ben & Jerry's quote, and it said, if it's not fun, why do it? And I was laughing, thinking about that in the context of your journey with this ice cream cone becoming the cornet.
Yeah.
I mean, it is ultimately about fun, or even, to quote the Stones, satisfaction.
Yeah, right. The basis of cooking is to make people happy. That's what we need to do, right? And so many chefs get caught up in other reasons why they're cooking and forget that they're nurturing their guests, nurturing their team, nurturing those individuals that bring us our food, our farmers, our fishermen, our foragers, our gardeners, right? I mean, that's all a part of the nurturing cycle that goes on in our lives and in restaurants' lives. Whatever we can do, whatever I can do to lighten somebody's experience at the restaurant and make it more fun, then that's what I'm going to do, because we want to have fun as well. I mean, in the kitchen, if we're not smiling in our kitchens, then we're not having fun either. In some ways, it's a very serious business, but in other ways, it's also an experience that we have every single day. We eat every single day, 2 or 3 times a day. So it can't be so serious that we forget the purpose of what we're doing, right? Is to nurture one another.
Hey everyone, taking a quick break here to tell you a little bit about our Season 11 presenting sponsor, the high jewelry Maison Van Cleef & Arpels, which this year is collaborating with the American Museum of Natural History in New York to present the exhibition Cosmic Splendor, Jewelry from the Collections of Van Cleef & Arpels, an awe-inspiring assemblage of jewelry creations, timepieces, and precious objects with astronomical references. Featuring nearly 70 celestial, mythological, and astrological jewelry creations that celebrate the wonders and mysteries of the cosmos, the exhibition presents an enchanting universe of jewelry from the Maison's patrimonial collection, as well as contemporary creations, some of them on loan from private collections. You can purchase admission tickets or learn more about Cosmic Splendor at amnh.org/exhibitions. That's amnh.org/exhibitions. And now, back to the episode. Well, and there's this element of thinking fast and thinking slow, and somehow fun rears its head in between. But, I did want to talk about slowness because your practice, to me, embodies that. And I was going through the French Laundry Cookbook from 1999, and in it you write, "Our hunger for the 20-minute gourmet meal, for one-pot ease and pre-washed, pre-cut ingredients has severed our lifeline to the satisfaction of cooking. Take your time, take a long time, move slowly and deliberately and with great attention." I mean, this is 1999, so, we're now here almost, nearing 30 years later. What do you think about that quote, and also just this notion of slowness in your work now that you see it over these nearly 5 decades now?
Yeah, I think we've grown in our culture to want things quickly. I'm not sure why. Think about the panini, right? I mean, somebody went to Italy 50 years ago or whatever, 60 years ago, and they had a panini, right? And the panini was made to order and it was put on the panini grill, and it took, 5, 6, 7 minutes to grill, and they had this wonderful experience with panini. And now you come to, they bring it back to America and it's all the rage. And now at Bouchon Bakery, for example, we do a panini, right? And they want it in a minute and a half. It's like, well, how can you do that? Well, they've created these microwaves out of the griddle. I mean, it's a whole different kind of a piece of equipment that will produce a panini in a minute and a half. Is that truly a panini? I mean, can't we really wait for 7 minutes to experience something that is more true to the origin of the panini? It's just sad to see that we've taken some of these wonderful experiences around food, modified them to a point where we get them quicker, but diminish the quality of them so greatly that we don't even recognize what it is. Now, maybe the person has never been to Italy, so never really had a real panini. So yes, to him, that's what it is, and that's redefined what we have. I remember one time I was in London, I did a food show there. There were 2 chefs, and at the end of the show, there was a contest, like who could make the omelet the quickest. And I'm thinking, I watched Daniel Boulud do it on some video, maybe it was YouTube, and it was a total disaster when he was trying to cook an omelet in 30 seconds. And I'm thinking, like, why are we doing this? Why are we telling our viewers that they can cook an omelet in 30 seconds or 45 seconds or whatever time it is? So it gets towards the end of the show, and I've got my mise en place, underneath my little cook station. And he says, go. And I turn the fire down really low, and I bring out my mise en place, my omelet pan, my eggs. And I started saying, if you don't have 7 or 8 minutes to make an omelet in the morning, then don't make an omelet. and he's standing behind me because now he has a timing issue, right? He needs to complete this segment in like a minute. And he's kind of kicking me from behind going, Thomas, you got to move. I'm like, this is the process of making an omelet. So just take your time, because you'll be so much more satisfied than trying to do it quickly. I think those things we kind of get confused on around food. What is a preparation for food? It's progression. You start here and you end there. There are specific steps that you have to go through for the result to be something that you're going to really enjoy. That only happens if you have experience with the dish prior.
The relationship between time and taste is so fascinating. And I think we could unpack many of your dishes through time and taste. I mean, I love how you've talked about French onion soup, leave it overnight.
You have to, maybe 2 nights.
Yeah. Or some of your dishes, there's the meat one where you bake it for like 5 hours inside of dough. Yeah.
I mean, we become short order cooks in many restaurants. Cooking a piece of meat or cooking a steak or cooking a piece of fish, right? It's just all sauteing, pan roasting, quick. Mm. The things that I love are like adobe de boeuf, which takes 3 days to make, because then you really kind of understand the transformation of food. And it's that transformation of food that gets me so excited. Yes, I can grill a steak in 5 minutes, and that's fine. I'll do that when I want a steak like that. But the actual transformation of food, making tripe, those types of things, which are really, or even the transformation of a chicken, roasting a chicken, and understanding how to do that well.
Let's go back to your upbringing here. You were born at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California, the youngest of 5 boys. Your parents divorced when you were young, and your mother raised you while managing a restaurant called the Redwood Inn in Palm Beach, California.
Yeah.
Around 15, you started working for her as a dishwasher, sort of a night gig, I guess. And after high school, your mom put you in the chef seat. Your brother Joseph taught you some basic cooking skills. We could definitely dig deep into your childhood, but I wanted to ask, just with hindsight, how you think about your mother's influence on your life in the kitchen and the impact on you becoming a chef that she had.
Yeah, well, my mother's influence went way beyond the kitchen. The youngest of 5 boys, 2 of my older brothers had already left the nest, so to speak. I had a half sister, and it's funny because I have 2 half sisters. When my parents remarried, they had 5 boys together. They each had a girl with their new partner. And so there were 3.5 of us at home because my 3rd oldest brother was in and out. My older brother Joseph always wanted to be a chef. So, he would come home from school, at 13 or 14 years old and turn Graham Kerr on. If you remember the Galloping Gourmet, he had all of his cookbooks. I was kind of a lost soul. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't have anything, I had the hobbies. Yes, I played baseball, basketball, football, things like that. But there was nothing that piqued my interest enough to continue to pursue that, like my brother. But my mother gave me a great sense of awareness, attention to detail, a sense of work ethic that began when I was 6 or 7 years old. And part of that was, she did work at night. My older brothers did take care of us, for a period of time. And we all had chores to do. And I had to do not only my chores, but my older brother's chores as well, because they forced me and my brother Joseph to do their chores. So understanding the sense of urgency, getting the chores done in time, understanding the standards that they had to be performed, because my mother came home and the vacuum cleaner wheels and weren't on the carpet correctly, right? The perfect lines, right? That she would be upset with us. So that was something that, my mother gave me, was a sense of urgency.
And precision.
And precision, exactly, right? Sense of awareness, right? Yeah. Work ethic, these kinds of things. And I just took that into my life, and it's still part of it. So my mother being my first mentor, as many of our parents are, right? Your mother, your father, they make decisions for you. And they're your mentors and help you find your way and hopefully give you the right direction to actually discover what the way you want to go. And that was my mother. Even though I wasn't interested in becoming a cook, to keep me out of trouble, she put me in the kitchen, washing dishes. Years later, I realized the 6 disciplines I learned washing dishes, helped me become who I am today. My brother always kind of got to be with the cooks, and I stayed at the dishwasher. She was running a small private club in Palm Beach called the Palm Beach Yacht Club, which was basically a lunch place for local businessmen who weren't very adventurous about food. The most adventurous that they were was maybe Eggs Benedict. So learning how to make hollandaise sauce for my brother Joseph was critical. But other than that, grilling a hamburger, making an omelet, grilling flank steak. And this is, again, it's fascinating because if you just look at sourcing food then, when I started sourcing food now, I had 2 people to go to source everything. I called my baker every night to order the bread, and one other company to order everything else, from chemicals to vegetables to placemats to anything. It was all coming from one person. Now, of course, today it's much changed. But that's kind of where it began for me. And I wasn't really interested in cooking, although I started doing it well. I could multitask. I paid attention. I can replicate what I was taught fairly quickly. But the yacht club was challenging in many ways, but nonetheless, I was able to excel there. But most importantly, it gave me the opportunity to travel, because you can go anywhere and get a job as a cook.
I wanted to sort of unpack your journey from there. But in the interest of time, I thought I would try myself to lay it out here for the listeners. I'll see if I can do it justice. But after working for your mom's restaurant, you entered a period of, as you've put it, 2 decades of failing.
Yeah.
And this journey begins more or less with a summer job at the Dunes Club in Narragansett, Rhode Island, where you're working under this French-born chef, Roland Hennin, who became your mentor. Mm-hmm. Then you work as a failed chef and owner of a restaurant called the Cobbly Knob in West Palm Beach.
Right next to the Highlight Fronton, by the way, right?
I just love the name, the Cobbly Knob.
I know, yeah.
Then you go to another job at Café du Parc in North Palm Beach, then to 3 years as a chef of a 60-seat restaurant near Catskill, New York. Then to an assistant chef job at the Grand Hyatt in New York, which lasted for 10 days.
Probably, yeah. Wasn't my thing.
Then to a chef job at Raoul's in Soho in New York. And after that, to Maurice at the Parker Meridian Hotel. Then to a poissonnière or fish cook job at the Polo Lounge at the Westbury Hotel, which was being helmed at the time by Patrice Bolle and Daniel Ballou.
Yeah.
From there, you went to Paris for a year, working in half a dozen 2- and 3-Michelin-star restaurants. Then in 1985, you became the chef and a partner of the restaurant Raquel in Manhattan. This is when you get your first big reviews. Florence Fabricant wrote in the New York Times, "What makes Keller notable in a city that's well populated with talented cooks are his daring flights from the ordinary. A few of the items on his menu verge on the bizarre."
Oh, wow.
Adding, Keller's solid foundation in classical French cooking elevates his dishes and saves them from absurdity. But, by 1990, Raquel too was gone, and soon enough you find yourself in downtown Los Angeles, which you were talking about earlier, the Cornet, where you'd gotten this job as an executive chef of Checkers. You stayed there for a year. Next, you left restaurant world for 18 months, began making olive oil commercially.
Yes.
That's where I'll leave the story. I'm glad I was there. I sort of unpacked your early resume there.
Yeah, you did. I mean, obviously you condensed it a little bit. There's a couple of little things in there. But yeah, that's a really great summary of my life up until that moment in time where, when you say I left Checkers, I mean, I was fired from Checkers, and I'm not afraid to say that. And it was okay because I wasn't enjoying the job. I was a chef de cuisine. I was the executive chef there, but I'm really a chef de cuisine of a restaurant. At Checkers, as an executive chef, you're responsible for everything. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, room service, banquet, staff meal, amenities, all the different things. But I didn't really migrate very well to that type of job. And so, the manager came in one day or invited me to his office and said, "You're out of here." And I left. Funny enough, though, I met his wife because they lived there for a little while, and I got to know them. And fast forward 10, 12 years, his wife runs up to me. I was doing an event somewhere, and she said, I need you to meet somebody. And I did. I met the person that she wanted to meet, and I invited her and her husband to dinner. And this is the gentleman that fired me 12 years earlier. And when he was coming back to the kitchen, I said, "Great to see you. I just want to thank you. Because had you not fired me, I would not be here today." And so you think about the significant decisions that are made for you and the significant decisions that you make yourself. And that was a significant decision in my life when he fired me that propelled me to find another path. I mean, I needed to find something else to do. And yes, I was out of the profession for quite some time before being able to open French Laundry. That was probably a little more than 2 years. And that was a significant decision, just to buy the French Laundry without any resources at all. I had no money, I had no job. I didn't have the skill, the knowledge, or the experience to actually buy a restaurant and do the things I had to do. But Don and Sally Schmitz, they made a significant decision for me and said, "We're going to support you through this process." 18 months they supported me through the process. And I was truly blessed to have their commitment, to what I wanted to do with their restaurant when they left. I always say my biggest asset at the time was my ignorance. If someone had laid out for me a list of all the things I'd have to do, to buy the restaurant, I would have said, "This is impossible. I can't do any of these things." Maybe a couple of things, but most of them I couldn't do. And therefore I would have given up from the very beginning. But it was the ignorance and the little successes, right, along the way that continue to propel you forward. It's like golf, for example. I mean, you hit one good shot out of 90 shots and you're like, "I'm going to play again," right? Because, you have some success and you feel that success to motivate you in strong ways that continue to persevere and do the things that you don't think you can do or couldn't do before. And you realize that you can do anything that you want if you really put your mind to it, if you put the effort behind it. If you're determined and committed, anybody can do anything they want. I sit here today because of that, not because I was smarter or better chef or, I was just persistent. I was not going to let that opportunity pass me by.
You also had the wonderful bounty of Napa Valley and Yountville, California. I would say also the time in which this was occurring was also really important, especially from a food perspective. The definition of fine dining was changing, and you were a big part of that. You got to kind of create all these inventive high-low dishes that I think really would push it over the years.
Yeah.
And here I'm talking about Per Se too, and your other restaurants. I mean, some of these dishes include tongue-in-cheek, comprising braised beef cheeks and veal tongue and baby leeks and horseradish cream, oysters and pearls, as you mentioned earlier, bacon and eggs, coffee and donuts. I mean, you're serving this at a fine dining establishment. You even did a PB&J out of slow-poached Hudson Valley foie gras, Concord grape gelée, peanut brittle, celery branch, and Kendall Farms creme fraiche.
Yeah. Don't forget macaroni and cheese.
And steak and fries.
That's, being an American affords you the opportunity to actually bring these things back and reinterpret them in different ways. We found that to be, a path forward for me, and we had fun. It wasn't me who was developing all the dishes. I mean, the great thing about The French Laundry was the sense of collaboration, right? And anybody can have an idea and share the idea, and we let people share their ideas, which doesn't typically happen in a restaurant.
Hey everyone, taking another quick break here to tell you about our weekly newsletter, where I share a behind-the-scenes look into each time-sensitive episode, where we also get into various things in the cultural sphere our team at The Slowdown is paying attention to. You can sign up and join our 13,000 plus other subscribers by going to slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. And now, back to the episode. I wanted to ask you about the French Laundry kitchen because, obviously, from a time perspective, that's also so interesting. There were multiple iterations of the kitchen, the most recent of which was this major overhaul in 2017, where you worked with the architecture firm Snøhetta, this $11 million kitchen renovation, or at least that's what I read in the New York Times.
Yeah.
All the details that went into making that kitchen. It just reminds me of even the precision you were describing of vacuuming your mom's floor, right? Just everything was done for a reason. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that, how the design impacts the culture, impacts the food, kind of that sort of beginning with the smallest detail and then finding its way to the plate, basically?
You just mentioned that everything has a beginning point and an end point. And the end point is giving our guests this experience, right? Both in food and service and wine, all these different things. But the beginning of that, really is manifested in where we are, who we are, and what we're able to do. That is the fifth kitchen of the French Laundry. The first kitchen was Don and Sally's kitchen, which was my kitchen for the first year. When we built the second kitchen, which is on the same site as the fifth kitchen, so that was the second kitchen, and the third kitchen when we remodeled, when we opened per se, we blew up that kitchen and redid the whole thing for the third kitchen. The fourth kitchen was the temporary kitchen while we were building the fifth kitchen. For 2.5 years, we worked out of 4 shipping containers, right, that were modified and put in place to accept the equipment that was in the third kitchen. Well, we built the fifth kitchen. And we're already in plans for, the renovation of the fifth kitchen because we always realize that we can do better. It's a curse. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, why can't we just be satisfied with what we're doing today? Why do we always have to search for betterment? But that's just the way I am. And therefore, that's our culture and that's what we do. This is also, when you think about where we were, the generation before me in America, chefs didn't really run their restaurants. They didn't own restaurants. So the kitchens weren't necessarily acceptable, if you will, right, or appropriate to work in as they are today. So making sure that we as chefs who own our own restaurants are not only spending time on the dining room, making sure that that is as comfortable as it needs to be, but making sure the kitchen is as comfortable as it needs to be, has the resources that it needs, has the equipment that it needs, has the space that it needs for us all to be able to work comfortably. Now, there were times in the French Laundry kitchen when it wasn't comfortable. Before we did the renovation in 2004, we didn't have air conditioning in the kitchen. I mean, it'd be 110 degrees, working in the corner, and it was just really difficult. But it was almost also a norm. It was normal to actually work in a kitchen like that. But we realized we needed to make a better environment for us. And so the new kitchen represents a wonderful environment with enough space for all of us to work, the right equipment for us all to excel at what we're doing. And the attitude of the team that comes into the kitchen, both dining room and kitchen team, is one that is uplifting. They're proud to be in the kitchen. They're happy to be in the kitchen. And that's the way it should be. I mean, most people who go home are happy to be in their kitchen. And so trying to establish the same vernacular that we have at home, this idea that there's a front and back of the house in restaurants, that's just weird to me. It's like, really? I mean,
kitchen and dining room.
Exactly. It's like, go home and there's a kitchen and dining room. Why in a restaurant is there back in front of the house? It's just wrong. So, we work on those things and trying to redefine who we are and how we work. And it's an important way to accomplish it. The new French Laundry kitchen was actually built to accept more guests in our kitchen. So there's more space for the guests to actually come in the kitchen. and hang out, right, for 10, 15 minutes or 5 minutes to take a visit. And that's something that Sally had done from the very beginning. She'd always invite guests back to her tiny kitchen. And so we just kept that tradition going. And today it's part of the experience for the guests to come in, have dinner, come into the kitchen, say hello, take a picture or whatever, or just hang out for a few minutes just to see how a kitchen operates.
I want to talk about longevity. Well, longevity and pleasure, I suppose. You've written to give pleasure. You have to take pleasure yourself. For me, it's the satisfaction of cooking every day, the mechanical jobs I do daily, year after year. This is the great challenge, to maintain passion for the everyday routine and the endlessly repeated act, to derive deep gratification from the mundane. I mean, this is time in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And in the Chef's Table episode, you say the ritual of doing the same thing over and over again and getting really good at it, that was magical to me. But maybe more to the point, or a different way of phrasing the question would be, is persistence the greatest pleasure?
I think the result of your persistence is the greatest pleasure, right? And to see a guest that has that joy in the experience, right? Because that's what it's all about. When the word delicious is such an important word for me, right? People say, oh, I had this amazing meal, this extraordinary meal. Yes, but was it delicious, right? I mean, that's what I want.
Did it taste good?
Right. I want somebody to come back and say, wow, that dinner was delicious. That's all I need to hear, because then you know you made that person happy. You know you've succeeded in your quest. You know you've working with the ingredients and the farmers and fishermen and foragers and gardeners that are bringing you those ingredients and representing those in the way that gives pleasure to a person and nurtures their body and their soul is so fundamental in the way I believe the way we work. And that's a beautiful thing. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, though.
Well, I mean, I think it's really this idea of longevity through the lens of the repeated act, the ritual.
Going back to the analogy of a sports franchise, we're athletes when we walk in the kitchen. So we become a commis and we're the rookies. You've been hired or you've been recruited to be part of this team because of qualities that you represented, right? So, but you have to learn everything along the way. You've never played at that level before. And then as you grow and as you succeed, you become a chef de partie. So now you're like part of the team on the field. And that's why I said earlier, that's the moment in your life, which is the most gratifying, I shouldn't say the most gratifying, but certainly one of the most gratifying moments of your life at that period of time. And enjoy it because you are part of that field team. And then you become a sous chef. And so now you're managing other people. And that's a hard transition from being one of the guys, actually like managing the guys, right? Because they look at you differently and you have to look at them differently. You have to have this opportunity to actually mentor, to lead them, to criticize them, to celebrate them, all the different things that a leader needs to do. And then you become a chef de cuisine, and now you're running the entire kitchen, not just a section of the kitchen. So you move yourself away and away. But as you go through your career, and if you look at sports, right, you have the rookie, the field player, then you're the manager, right, the field manager, or one of the field managers, then you become the general manager, then you become the owner. Finding success at each level, at each interval, at each era, for me has been my biggest quest, right, is making sure that I can continue every day to have an impact on the youngest team members that are there all the way up to, right, the chef de parties, the sous chefs, the CDCs, and even in the dining room, the same thing, to influence the young individuals that are coming in, the service staff. It's a wonderful thing to watch the transformation that they go through, right? A young kid coming in as a runner, right, which is one of the first jobs, who doesn't really understand the kitchen, doesn't have the confidence, doesn't have the vocabulary. And, 6 months later, their fathers are coming to me, the parents are coming to me and say, I can't believe the transformation that's happened in my son or my daughter working in this restaurant. And you think about that and you go, shit, that's pretty cool, right? Because you've given this young person the opportunity to transform themselves into something different. And they find joy in that. We find joy in that. So when you think about a restaurant, yes, we all think about a restaurant as a place to go to eat and drink, but a restaurant is so much more that it gives to so many people. And that's something that excites me, right? Yes, our ultimate goal is to feed our guests and give them delicious food. But everybody that's involved in that and how they learn, how they're transformed, I'm really proud to be part of that.
You mentioned success, and I love your definition of success. In a TED Talk you once gave, you linked success with memory, saying one of the biggest compliments I can receive is when a guest comes to our restaurant, has dinner, and I meet them and they say, this reminds me of.
Yeah.
And in your French Laundry per se cookbook from 2020, you define fine dining in a sense as memories that only expand with time. Maybe I was hoping in the time we have left that you could elaborate on the importance of memory making for you, this link between success and memory and this intersection of time, taste, and place.
I think we're all searching for memories, right? For experiences, I should say. We're all searching for those experiences that result in a wonderful memory, right? And sometimes, a wonderful memory could be a disastrous experience, right? But it turns into a wonderful memory because you actually lived through it. We, right, as individuals, I believe, right, we continue to deposit in our memory banks these wonderful moments of time throughout our life that really make us rich, gives us this sense of enjoyment, like, oh my goodness, remember that, remember this. And then there's the reference points that are also established around memories, like my memory of my first roasted chicken, right? So everything that is associated with roasted chicken for my entire life is based on that, right? That first memory, right? And yes, I've had better roasted chickens than the first one, but that's the reference point that you began with.
What was your first roasted chicken?
My mother's roasted chicken, which wasn't really, my mother wasn't a cook, by the way. So she tried, but, she didn't practice it very often. But I think memories are give us a sense of internal wealth that can't be replaced by anything else. And that's what I search for, those memories. And giving people memories is memorable for myself, right? I mean, people come in the restaurant, like I said, this experience reminds me of a great memory that they had. And it's like, oh my God, I remember those. I remember what they say. And so we're exchanging these moments of time throughout our lives that intersect with others. Some people we know, some people we don't know, but enriches our lives and enriches their lives. And that's really what success is all about.
Not to end on a macabre note here, but I was fascinated to learn that you cooked your father's last meal.
I did.
Which was barbecued chicken with mashed potatoes and braised collard greens. What did it mean for you to do that? And how do you think about the notion of a last meal more generally? I mean, I think it's fascinating that in the cycle of life, or even in thinking about religion, the Last Supper does seem to play this oversized role.
Yes. Yeah. Well, obviously I didn't know it was my father's last meal, right? It was a Sunday afternoon. He'd become a quadriplegic about a year before that, a horrific accident. But he persevered to find ways to do things that he did before. And the doctor said he would never eat again like that. And so inviting him over to the house and making him that dinner was a Sunday afternoon. It wasn't a ritual, but we would do it occasionally. And then, of course, the next day is when he passed away. So you don't realize it, but the idea of it, right? The idea of the composition, the barbecue chicken, right? The mashed potatoes and the collard greens are things that he loved, right? And all of those had reference points in his life. And we finished with strawberry shortcake, by the way, which again, right, coming from his time, strawberry shortcake was such a luxury. He was born in 1918. Think about fresh strawberries and having it on a piece of cake with whipped cream. I mean, that was the cat's meow, as he would say. Those are the moments that we experience. And those are the moments that I'm grateful for. I mean, not many of us get to spend the last moments with our parents. I mean, and to be with him when he passed was an extraordinary moment in time for me. Extremely sad. Even though you think you're prepared for your parents passing, you never really are until it really happens. And then it's still extremely, extremely, extremely sad. But we all go through it, right? Our parents are supposed to pass before us. It's, that's the way life is. And so appreciating those moments is what we have to do, and appreciating where we came from and who was part of our lives, who brought us into our lives, who influenced our lives. It just becomes much more focused when your father or your mother pass away.
And how beautiful that you got to give your dad this sense of fun and joy and memory, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and, grateful to be here.
Extra thanks to our Season 11 presenting sponsor, the high jewelry Maison Van Cleef & Arpels. Since its founding in Paris's Place Vendôme in 1906, Van Cleef & Arpels has developed a distinctive blend of poetry and refinement. With its jewelry and watchmaking collections, The Maison is an invitation to a timeless universe of beauty and harmony. You can discover more at VanCleefArpels.com. That's VanCleefArpels.com. And thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Time Sensitive on our website, timesensitive.fm, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To keep up with our latest time-sensitive episodes and get behind-the-scenes updates, sign up for our newsletter at slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram at slowdown.media. Our theme music was composed by Billy Martin. This episode was produced by Ramon Broza, Mimi Hannon, Emily McDonald, Kylie McConville, and Johnny Simon.